happened. It just fell off. Yes, got it. All right. Brittany's back. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey,
This is gonna be the funniest recording.
Okay. Hey, Andrea, thank you for stalling for time while I reviewed it.
Oh, you're welcome.
And so, let me move my chair. And so I'm not sure, I didn't mean to cut you off if you're in the middle of a story.
No. I was done. I was all done. It worked out. Perfect timing as usual.
Divine timing. Yes. I apologize, everybody. I was having issues with my computer. So now we're back on together. I'm not sure if you already introduced yourself, Andrea, but I would love to.
I didn't.
Okay, perfect.
You go ahead like I've done nothing. I just told random funny stories. So
beautiful.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I'm sure everybody enjoyed. You're a great storyteller. Very funny. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to Soul Sessions. We're glad to have you here, and I am super excited to be with my friend Andrea Land. Andrea Land does a lot of different things. She is a celestial. We have been diving deep into celestial talk together. And she talks about space weather. You do oracle card readings. You're a beautiful singer that carries a lot of healing frequencies. You helped heal me and open up my heart space with one of your songs. She also does her own podcast with Gridwork Goddess. I'm sure there's a lot of people that know you from your podcast there. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about you?
I recently started doing consciousness anchoring. I do animal communication. And I have a couple of other podcasts, actually. There's one that I collaborate with on YouTube called Meow Podcast with Serafina Blackman. And we have wonderful guests on there, not always woo stuff too, just sometimes it's general, world events and social conditions we talk about. And then I have two other podcasts, one called Call Me Karen, with a very obnoxious spelling of Karen, Caeryn, which is more of a socio-political project that I started before Gridwork Goddess. It's been kind of on hiatus, but I'm looking to start that one back up. And then I recently started putting out more adult funny tales of dating, modern dating, and some of the behavior people have online called Diction Podcast with a K.
I love that. So, that's a good fun. Love play on words.
Yeah. But yeah, that's me, and I'm so excited to be here. I was really happy to have you on mine. Everybody has been listening to your episode and loving it so much. So thank you for having me on.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for having me on your podcast. Could you talk a little bit more? I want to ask you more about the podcasts themselves, but I'd like to talk more about the consciousness anchoring, because that's something new to me as well about hearing. So I would love to hear more. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people that would too.
Well, I would love to talk about it. It's a fairly new thing that I am doing. A little background so that people understand where I'm coming from with the whole celestial thing and everything, and just so that the viewers understand. This is something that just happened for me 6 months ago, this full knowing and this energetic expansion, and it has been like going through a second adolescence, almost getting used to the idea that I embody this consciousness and that I'm supposed to do these things that can seem so huge and overwhelming. So through the process of channeling with whales and Gaia and all of that work, I came to the knowing that I embody the consciousness Nemesis, which she's a Titan, she's a celestial, she is the daughter of Gaia in her planetary form. She's an asteroid in our solar system, and she is the goddess of memory, of all knowledge. When this came through, I was trying to understand what they were talking about because it didn't make any sense. They were telling me I was this person that I'm the library. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm the library? Because that just didn't make any sense to me, because I knew about the Akashic records and everything. So what wound up happening, the way they showed this to me so that I would understand, was that I happened to be in a meditation that was designed to kind of lead everybody to the Akashic records and to the library. So I'm in the middle of this group meditation with a wonderful person that am in their Patreon, and all of a sudden my guides come in, and one of my ancestors, and they say, we're going to show you something nobody else will be able to see or be aware, but it's time for you to understand, because I could never get there. Like, I could never get to the library or to the Akashic records, and they were talking about it. I just sort of, it was just like, as if I were a database or a library, right? So I'm in this meditation, and all of a sudden I am aware of these these other beings walking around in my consciousness, and that they're present in my consciousness, that Nemesis consciousness, which is the library. It's not even just the Akashic records. It's like all knowledge of everything that's ever happened, is happening, will happen. And now, just like a librarian who would work in a library, I don't have, immediate access and recall to all of that information. So through the process of understanding this, and more channeling and more talking to my guides and trying to understand what the purpose of all this was, because I was like, okay, great. So you're telling me I'm a know-it-all, and now I'm supposed to tell people I'm a know-it-all. And what am I
It's a big thing.
It is. It's a big thing. I mean, and what am I supposed to do with it? How do I help people with it? And so, through the channeling and the listening and taking my time to understand it, I kept saying, okay, I understand, but now how do I help people with it? What do I do? And so they explained to me that I can help people by giving them their book, that I can give them the book of their consciousness. And that is where the consciousness anchoring evolved from. It was a very specific thing that they showed me that combined the energy expansion that I had just been doing on my own for grid work and for multidimensional expansion. But they showed me how to use all of that to help other people. So what I have been doing, and I've only been doing this for 6 weeks, but the results and the feedback from people has been amazing and very heartening, because like I said, when I first got all these downloads, I was like, okay, great. What do I do with this? What do I do with this tool? So the way consciousness anchoring works is what I do. My energy, because of that Nemesis energy and because of my connection with the earth, being my actual literal celestial mother, I amplify other people's energy. Whatever is in them, I amplify it. So I can amplify it. I amplify their joy. I amplify what they need to release. So using that amplification, I take them through a guided meditation where we expand out their unconditional love field. We build a sphere of unconditional love around their energy body, their physical body, and it's sort of like a permanent structure that we create. And then I guide you through expanding that out larger than the earth to show you your true size and have that experience. And from what others have told me, they really feel it. They feel just like I felt the first time it happened to me, what it feels like to be not, the tiny person that we kind of see ourselves as. It's like, I think a lot of us have this idea that our soul or our astral self is just sort of like a carbon copy of us, the same size and height and everything, and that's not it at all. We can be any size. And so in our astral form, we are titans, we're giants, we can be these giants. So I expand you out to that size through very gentle safe and loving process and help you build your unconditional love sphere. And then once we're out there, I call in my muses, because Nemesis is also the mother of muses.
Mm-hmm.
And we create your Taurus from the energy connection that we've established between source and you and the earth. That is an infinity loop of energy, so that you're never depleted and never overwhelmed. And then so after we create your Taurus, then you enter the library, or you see the doors, and some people get their books in different ways, but you are the only one who sees your book. You and your highest self have control over what you remember and when, what you need to know. And then we take that book, we anchor it in your Taurus. So that is the consciousness anchoring part.
Okay.
Is that I am putting all of this information in your permanent energy field that we have created around you, so that you don't need to be constantly trying to escape your body to find your missing pieces. Your fractured consciousness from multiverses and lifetimes and all of your travels. And then once we've done all that, and believe it or not, this can be a 20 to 40 minute process. It doesn't take very long, but it takes a long time to explain.
Yeah.
But so once we get all of that done, then we reverse the process and just slowly, gently bring you back in closer to your physical body. And as that is happening, we are bringing all of your light, all of your consciousness, your Taurus, your energy field, all that is you, back into the infinite void within, the space that you have inside of you that is just as infinite as the external space that we multidimensionally expand to. So by fully embodying your light, by fully embodying all of your consciousness, this allows you to stay more centered, going through your growth and your lessons and whatever tower moments might come up in your life. It allows you to always have a feeling of peace. And it's hard to explain how you can be sad or frustrated, or, like I just got fired, but you still have bliss, but you really do. This permanent connection that is established, this like eliminates the need for you to always be connecting, always be trying to connect, because you have a perpetual energy flow through your system and around you. And so once we bring all of that back into your beautiful physical vessel, and then you're comfortable in your homeostasis of your sphere, your unconditional love sphere, and that Taurus around you, then you have the ability from there, with you and your highest self, to start pulling in whatever information you want to know or need to know in this life. And you can enjoy the human experience a lot more. It just makes everything less difficult. And this doesn't mean that you're bypassing anything. It's just like, those people that you meet and you're like, wow, they're just always kind of chill. How do they, all this stuff's happening to them. I would be losing my shit if it was me.
Yeah.
But it gives you that. It just gives you this ability to be centered within yourself, have your own sovereignty, and have that unconditional love flowing through you like a river at all times. And that unconditional love frequency is what gives you the grounding and the centeredness and the connection with Source and with our Mother Gaia.
Andrea, that is so incredibly beautiful. I feel like I just went on a whole journey with you. I felt like just like I was being taken elsewhere, and like hearing this and healing at the same time, just even listening to you explain it. And so with the anchoring part, it's almost what it sounds like to me is that it's anchoring how incredibly powerful you are. So when those things do happen, life's, quote unquote challenges, struggles, it's like, oh, it's okay because I remember that I'm a divine creator and that I am
Mm-hmm.
incredibly powerful. And so like it's okay that these things are happening. It's for my highest and greatest good. And you can come back to
Exactly.
that and say, I remember that feeling of when I was completely connected in and saw me at my true authentic self.
Exactly. And with practice, because it's just a very simple breathing pattern, you're breathing in through the nose, breathing source energy in through your crown, and then breathing out unconditional love from
Mhm.
your center, your solar plexus, and simply engaging that. Once you've done this once or twice and you kind of have it, you really feel like you're fully embodying yourself.
Mhm.
You have access to that immediately. Like, for instance, you could be, let's say, in a mall during the holidays when everyone's acting
Yes.
a fool and being crazy and being really cranky with each other. You can engage in the breathing and just think to yourself, I am going to cover this whole store with my unconditional love sphere.
Mhm.
And that unconditional love frequency just transmutes whatever isn't of the highest good in
Mhm.
that space. And I have experimented with this and done this and watched how people just completely change in an instant.
Mhm.
They're nicer and being kind to each other. It's like it just completely transforms the situation. And I've watched this happen with people and places and land. And so once you have that, you can engage that any time. And then also by having your book of consciousness and having that perpetual connection to your highest self, it's like you can just go, okay, whatever it is, like my car broke down and I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. And so you engage that part of yourself and say, all right, we've got this.
Mhm.
I trust that the universe, that source is going to help me with this. And so what information can I have right now that will help me with this?
Mhm.
So it really does become just automatic. And so then that connection is always there. You feel that energy flowing through you all the time. And it makes the process of awakening and going through the stages where you're leveling up and expanding your consciousness more um, so much faster. It seems to really speed things up for people. And it's not bypassing because you still experience everything. It's just that, like you're saying, you experience it from a place of power and fully embodying all of your
Yeah.
glorious self.
Do you feel like because you're creating such a uh energy field around you, like you said, like an infinity energy field that's just going out even bigger than the planet, do you feel like every time that you activate someone in this way, and like you said, that when you go out and you can see that it's changing the environment and the people around you, so the more people that you activate, it's healing the whole planet because everybody has bigger energy fields now and is lifting the frequencies?
I think that's part of the plan. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the people that I've already worked with, they've been experimenting and practicing with it in different ways, like going to a family funeral where there's a lot of dysfunction and anger and resentment and stuff, and they will engage that love sphere, and uh, it changes the whole experience.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I really do believe that the more people who are activated and able to maintain this energy flow, just the better creation is going to work. The more we will all be able to be living in our highest good and treat each other, with the love that we're meant to.
Absolutely, moving into that unity consciousness, and you have a big part in that with this with this consciousness anchoring and magnifying that on such a bigger level. It just sounds like it's bringing the frequencies up at, like you said, like an accelerated rate, because everyone's energy field of healing is so much bigger with that
Mm-hmm,
type of
mm-hmm.
activation, which is beautiful. I keep getting the analogy of like the cloud, like you are the cloud, like
Yeah,
technologically. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It is strange, but yes, I think like that's what I'm coming to realize is that it's like, you know, ob- obviously we use books because that's more
Mhm.
exciting than saying, here's your zip drive.
Yes. Yep.
But in reality, that is what it's like. It's like I am a server, a database,
Mhm.
a holder of this information. Um, and, part of my mission with all of this, besides a year ago, I went through extreme initiation and tower moments to get me to this expanded place.
Mhm.
And I did not have the energy flow. I did not have the centered, empowered feeling. I wasn't fully embodied yet. And it was rough. And so I wanted to be able to find a way to make that easier for other people
Mhm.
coming after me going through that process. And so it does that. But the other thing that it does is the more of us who are capable of expanding out our energy field like that, the more effectively we can consciously do grid work to help the planet. And it's not so much that the earth needs our help in the way of, she'll be here whether we are or not,
Right.
but what a lot of people miss is that we're her children, just like all of the other life on the planet are her children, and she doesn't want anything to happen to us. So while we are in this space of time where the sun is having solar activity that puts life on Earth somewhat at peril, it is important for more of us to be energetically capable of shielding Earth's magnetosphere.
Mhm.
Because collectively and together we can do that, and it helps minimize the effects of the solar activity. And we can also use that to clean water. We can use it to minimize seismic activity. We
Mhm.
can use it to weaken hurricanes. There's a lot we can do.
Now we're kind of getting into your space weather, right? And so I have two
Mm-hmm.
questions for you that of your area of expertise. Before I get into what's going on with the sun, because I'm very interested in learning more about that too. Could you explain a little bit for people in the chat that may not be privy to what grid work is? So they have a
Okay.
better understanding of that. Because when you say grid work, I was like, oh, my guys are saying some people need to hear what that is.
Yes, that always requires a little more explanation because it's not widely talked about yet.
Mhm.
And basically, and some people might call it the matrix or have been calling it the matrix, but the when broken down to a light form, the structure of our planet and others, the structure of co-creation is like a grid. It's like a grid, which is the structure around which everything is created, if that makes sense. And so if you imagine a ball, and there has to be, it's called tensegrity, but there has to be the proper tension between all the points for it to maintain its shape, right?
Mhm.
So there's the original grid that we have been in for millennia. And what has been happening during this ascension process is that we are building the crystalline grid.
Mhm.
So people on the planet itself, we are evolving in real time from carbon-based to crystalline-based life forms. So this crystalline grid had to be built around the existing grid to allow that to to fade away like old flowers wither and die, and so it's not needed anymore. It's just reabsorbed, so that we have this new crystalline grid that allows for a different kind of dimensional reality and a different kind of co-creation with the universe. So there are lots of people who do various kinds of grid work. It's not all the same. I am more of what you would call a planetary grid worker, because I'm dealing with the space weather and the large geological events and the Schumann Resonance and those sorts of things. There are people who do more of like emotional and trauma grid work, where they are going specifically to places that where the land has a lot of trauma associated with it, or if there are events which are traumatic, like a sudden shock to the system, right? So for instance, Hurricane Ida, when that was going on, the emotional grid worker team was processing that overload, because it's sort of like, if you think about a power grid, right? Just our basic electrical grid that we have, for the electricity in our houses. There are systems in place that prevent it from getting overloaded, so that it doesn't shut everything down. And so that's kind of what the emotional grid workers, are doing, is they're preventing an overload in the system that causes some sort of a shutdown and a bigger butterfly effect, if you will, than if they're absorbing some of that shock. And I kind of, sometimes I look at it like it's as simple as we're shock absorbers, we're shock absorbers like on a car or bike. And so when there's a whole lot of earthquakes, or there's a hurricane, or there's other various events happening, if there's like an emotional trauma, I'm trying to think of examples without bringing up specific things, because I don't want to bring those words in right now, but just, collective traumas, things that happen, disasters that are emotionally impactful for people far beyond the reach of where it actually happened. Those kinds of things need help to be processed, so that the crystalline grid structure keeps its integrity. Ooh, that was a big explanation.
that was a beautiful explanation. And the reason that I asked you to explain that is I'm coming across a lot of people that are unaware that they're grid workers. Because I was going to say, do you come across a lot of people that are transmuting things, but they don't consciously know they're transmuting, and they're tapped into the global grid? And so when I tell them that, they say, oh, that makes sense. I'm transmuting energies that are outside of me, right? And it's almost like unlocking something
absolutely
in your consciousness.
True.
Yeah.
Yes, that is absolutely true. That is, as a matter of fact, that's how this all started for me, because I observed that in myself. I started noticing how it felt physically. And once I figured out what it was and what it, basically, most of us have been doing this in our sleep our entire lives.
Yes.
And a lot of people who have been doing it have dealt with mental health struggles, physical health struggles, because they didn't know what the source of it really was, because they were, totally unconscious of it. And that's how it was for me. But what I started noticing when I began to figure some of this stuff out is that the more I could be aware of it, the more I could do it consciously, the better my body felt. The amount of physical and emotional healing that has happened since I started doing this has been tremendous. That would be a whole other episode to go into, but so a year ago I started doing these episodes called Astral training, and so this is about how in our sleep, those of us who are grid workers or on some sort of team that is assisting in these efforts, in our sleep, we're going and doing training, various kinds of training. There's there's grid work to be done. There's some of us are time lords and are up there reviewing infinite potential choices to figure out what our best way to move, like what will bring in the highest good for everybody. And sometimes it's just personal life experiences, but because we are, like Jessa Reed talks about micro or macro. So because we are doing this on a macro level, even our individual life choices have a very big ripple out to the rest of the collective.
Have you seen the Loki series, the new Loki series? And they have it's not the same as what you're talking about. I just feel like there's a lot collectively that's being produced that is representative of the things that you're discussing. And so even with the Loki series, it was like macro and micro and all of our choices making big differences and how the timelines work out. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not.
I haven't. It's really funny. So here's what happened. Like everyone else, when the pandemic hit, like they binged Netflix and like watched all kinds of stuff, and but not me, because like I said, long story, but I was on weekly chemo for 6 years, and 3 years ago, I was able to stop taking it. But during that 6 years that I was taking it, I spent so much time watching TV because it was all I could do. So over the last year or two, I have watched almost nothing. So except going to the occasional movie. So I have missed out a lot on pop culture. And so I love it when people tell me these things, because it's very validating. And it also lets me know that, oh, okay, well, people are kind of starting to get the language a little bit, so they'll understand better.
Absolutely, because the preface of that is that there's just so many different timelines running, and people have to keep tabs on it and keep us moving towards the optimal timelines. And so I think a lot of times with movies and TVs like Matrix, all these things, they're being pulled from the unifying field and kind of being brought down for the languaging, like you said too. And with the grid work, like we talked about, I realized I was an empath a couple of years ago, and that was very healing. It helped me on my journey and said, oh, this is why so many things are happening to me and why my life has been this way. Then I realized I was a grid worker, and I was going into specific places and transmuting and healing trauma. And it was very validating to hear that, because I said, oh, that stuff is not necessarily mine. It is, because we're all one collective and planet. But you can utilize that and turn it on and off if you need to, when it's too much for your body and too much for your system. And even with the astral, while you're sleeping, some nights I have to say, hey guys, I'm not doing any work on the astral. I really need to sleep for my physical body on this plane.
Yeah. Sometimes the whales will put me in timeout, though, because I talk to the whales a lot. They're associated with the Akashic records. They've been here for 50 million years. They're pretty amazing. But they'll do that. They'll be like, okay, you just need to, because I'll put on the whale song, and then I'm like immediately like, okay, we're gonna channel, we're gonna look at some stuff, and they're like, no,
you need to go to sleep.
We would really love to just heal you tonight, so could you please allow us to do that? Because I am terrible about that. I consistently forget that I have to ask for that. You know what I mean? That like they need me to allow them to. They need me to say, could you please restore me tonight, or could you, I could use some healing with this thing. So yeah, that is definitely true. And that's part of what being conscious of all this does allow you to do, is exactly that. Because for years, I mean, I would wake up and feel like I must have been living like the movie The Matrix in my sleep. And then I would wake up and I would be like so flippin' tired, and just, feeling like I had just been yanked out of a a really intense game or something, and then here I am trying to function like a normal person. And so my energy was just depleted all the time. Um, the other thing about space weather that I want to mention, and this will be on the episode of Paranormal Karen when it comes out on the 17th, but this Schumann Resonance thing only started happening 4 years ago. And it started the very first really large spike in the Schumann resonance, where the hertz went up very high, was right after the Women's March and Trump's inauguration. It was a very interesting, because human consciousness can affect that. So we sort of had literally the perfect storm of events in human consciousness that were, really firing everybody up. And then also, and then also 4 years ago, at the same time that was happening, we had the last really large geomagnetic storm. And so all of that happened at the same time and converged. And then that was sort of like the catalyst for this process to start for Earth.
And that's what I was going to ask you too about the space weather and the sun and all of these things that are happening right now. What do you think is the reasoning for all of that? That why we're having all of these like up and down energies? Do you think it's just the collective shift that's happening and things are having to collapse for a rebirth almost, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's sort of like this is a bad way to put it, and it doesn't, I don't mean it the way it's sort of like a living death.
Yeah.
Just that, like, the old part of you, it's almost like a shedding, an emergence without the kind and the eternal.
Yes. No, we're not gonna,
a safer emergence. Yeah, an emergence of consciousness.
Yes.
There are many different traditions and fables and mythos about all of this, but there's a couple of things that are happening from what Gaia has told me and the whales. Earth herself, just like we're expanding our consciousness and we're raising our frequency, so is the Earth. Now, this process would have been a little gentler because we are in a solar cycle with the sun that is fairly predictable and normal. And even though the media makes it sound really super scary, there's nothing that unusual about it. It's not like the sun is doing anything different than it's been doing all along. We just happen to be living through one of those 1,000-year windows where there's a lot of activity. At the same time, that solar radiation and the solar winds and the coronal mass ejections are necessary for the elevation of the Schumann resonance, for Earth's ascension. So it's the celestial bodies have their own consciousnesses and personalities, right? Everyone wants to anthropomorphize, is that the word, anthropomorphize? Any consciousness that isn't human as somehow being, like not having personalities, not having spats with each other, not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we are mirrored through the entire universe. So the
it's
sun and the Earth are doing a tango.
Relative. Yes.
It is. And so the sun and the Earth right now are doing a tango, and the sun is, a bit egotistical and likes to tell the Earth what to do.
Okay.
And the Earth has this really great magnetosphere to protect her and all of us from having too much of the sun's influence. However, because of the industrialization, the magnetosphere is a little weaker than it would have been. So initially that would make one think, oh, so we screwed all this up But I still fall back to the idea that everything happens for the highest good in the way it's meant to. And what has started happening since, because I know I'm not alone. I know there's probably some person just like me in Japan and another one in Sweden and one in South America who are doing all the same things and figuring out all the same stuff. And because so many of us are doing that and have been actively participating in, expanding out our energy and doing all of this, it turned on a fail-safe. It's like the universal AI, right? It's like a universal program running, and I have like the stuff about this that is so cool is that I have scientific things to look at to show this. You know what I mean? So it's not just me going, woo, this is what I've come up with. Suddenly, recently, normally what happens, okay, so here's Earth and here's the sun over here being big, and it's shooting its CMEs at Earth, right? And so usually what happens is that Earth's magnetosphere, some of it penetrates, but most of it just goes around and back this way, right? And it's just like a stream, as if Earth was a car going down the highway and the wind was, blowing over. All of the sudden, we have these rays coming the other direction and kind of running interference to when we have really big coronal mass ejections and there's a lot of solar wind and pressure and radiation coming at the Earth. These other I'm calling them oppositional rays because they oppose. These other oppositional rays are kind of like pushing back to maintain the magnetosphere, so that Earth is protected. And so when I saw this, I went, and I talked to the whales, and I'm like, okay, and just guides in general. I was like, oh gosh, that's another thing, the whole Sanat Kumara thing and Lord Venus and. But
we can have a side conversation about the two of them.
Yeah. So he's sort of the boss of all of this. And I guess kind of like my boss and anybody else who's trying to do this stuff. And so he was the one that came through, and I heard like a computer voice. It was as if Alexa of the universe was talking to me. So what happened as a result of enough of us expanding our consciousness is that we have turned on this automatic oppositional ray program that helps protect the Earth when there's too much solar energy coming. So that's huge. I mean, it's basically like having this protective shield that we managed to flip a switch on by cooperating with each other and generating enough love on the planet.
That's amazing. I got chills all over my body where you're saying that, because I was going to say, where are the rays coming from? But if that's a program that we're running, that makes so much sense. And everything feels like that it is accelerating at a much faster rate. Like everything is just like geared up. And so when you were saying it almost felt like a click over. Yeah. I think a lot of people are feeling that, and it's making a lot of people nervous. But I tell people like, hey, we have to have the collapsing energy to have the rebirth energy come through.
And, the thing that I think maybe would reassure people or help them understand that it's not anything to be afraid of is that we don't have to, like, we can be building the new thing while we're tearing down the old thing. If you think about construction, like when cities are built, sometimes there's a building that, the most of the building needs to come down, but they'll use like this existing structure and build over it, build on top of it, strengthen the structure and build new. So it's really a simultaneous process that's happening. So the things that are torn down or collapsed, or whatnot, they are ready to fall away. It is almost like if you use the like the analogy of the Earth cycle with decomposers. like worms and mushrooms and fungus and whatnot. You know, the decomposers, they break stuff down, and then the plants eat the decomposers leave, and then the plants grow, and then that feeds the animals, and those animals feed other animals, and so it's the whole circle of life. And that's exactly what's happening, only just on a more cosmic level. And one of the things that I'm able to see with the Nemesis stuff is the collective timeline algorithms. And I call it algorithms because that really is what it's like. And this is part of why I do tune out a lot of stuff sometimes, because I know, like, for instance, I'm probably not going to see the new movie that just came out that everyone's excited about that starts with an M, because I don't need that in my brain.
It's interference with what's going on.
Yeah. And my job is to be perpetually pointing us towards the timeline of the highest good for everyone. And so that is what I stay focused on. And I try to only, feed my mind and body and soul what supports that and supports me doing that. Otherwise, it's so easy to get off track. But what I can say, though, is that I see the big scary visions. I see the same big scary visions that the other people put out publicly and predict. But I also see all the ways in which it can be changed, avoided, minimized. And so it's more like I get like all this data of all those timelines is sort of fed into a thing, and then it funnels out what I see as the most likely probability. And most of the time, that is so much less dramatic than what everybody else is, talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not to criticize anyone, like, they're seeing from the perspective they can see it from. And when I used to only see it from that perspective, it scared the hell out of me. I mean, I would be like, okay, what are you telling me? And then sometimes bad things would happen, and then I would be like, okay, well, what was the purpose of that? You know what I mean? I couldn't do anything about it. Why was I seeing that? But over time, gaining this ability to see fluid time and see quantum time and zoom out and have that perspective has allowed me to see those scary visions differently.
I love that. And I think that as human beings, our natural default is to go to what is the worst possible thing that could happen so we can prepare for it. And we say, okay, if that happens, I'm going to deal with it A, B, C, D, right? But sometimes that creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that is what you're pointing your attention to. That's what you get more of out of the universal algorithm, like you're saying. And the possibility of that happening is real, but then the other possibility of it not happening and something great happening is equally as possible, but we just tend to default to the other because we want to keep ourselves safe.
Yeah. And it makes perfect sense, because I know you are so knowledgeable about psychology and everything, and it's like that primitive part of our brain that we still have operating, even though most of the time we don't necessarily need it. It's like it's on overdrive. I know one of the things you wanted to talk about was the nervous system and the vagus nerve, and learning how to kind of master that within yourself. And that really is a big part of first of all the consciousness anchoring, that it assists with that. Definitely, because it just helps you to have all of your power embodied. But that is kind of, the thing that we have to learn how to override, is the parts of our brain that have not evolved away yet, but are no longer necessary. It's sort of like, in a way, like some of those fear responses and things are like an appendix in our brain that we don't really need anymore. But if it gets inflamed, it sure is a big old problem.
It
So,
is. And I tell people from like a psychology point that, because we're still evolving as human beings and we haven't evolved past those things necessarily yet, that if a tiger is chasing you in cavewoman, caveman days, your body reacts the same way as if you get a stressful email from your boss. But the
yeah.
only difference is when you run away from the tiger, your cortisol level drops and you're okay. But now in the modern day, as stress after stress after stress after stress, it just compounds on each other. And you get addicted to that fight or flight, that stress hormone to like keep you going. And it has a lot to do with capitalistic society and like keeping you in that cycle, right? And so what's beautiful about what you do with the consciousness anchoring is that you can learn to master your central nervous system and say, it teaches you to take a breath and say, we're going to be okay either way. Either way,
Yeah.
at a cosmic macro level, we are okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds so simple and it's like, really, is that it? But that is it.
Yeah.
It's being able to learn how to override your physiology and transform. And I do believe that because while we're building the crystalline grid for the planet and that structure around the planet, we are also having our crystalline DNA activated in our bodies. And so I really think that as that continues, we'll be given even more control over that, the ability to just override those things that we don't really need all the time anymore.
Yeah, we're getting all of our upgrades and letting go of some of those like appendage or appendix things.
Yeah.
We don't need it anymore. Yes, like the fear, like that. So something else that I wanted to talk to you about is the animal communication. And before we got on here, I told you that I was doing a reading with someone earlier and dolphins and whales came up for them. And I have been hearing so much about dolphins and whales and them coming in and they have been healing the planet and really coming in right now. And they seem to be, the information is coming more and more and more. More people are figuring this out about whales and dolphins. But you do animal communication, not just with whales and dolphins, but lots of other animals as well. So could you tell us a little bit more about your journey with communicating with everyone?
Yeah.
Everybody.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a fun little story. I have always been able to talk to animals since I was a little kid. And there were times when it was a problem because I did not have the fear that I should have had of certain situations. I was always protected in them, but I, surely gave my parents several heart attacks over the years in my family because, like, for instance, when I was 3, I went into a bear enclosure. There was a bear that was a sun bear. They're still pretty big. They're like 5 feet tall, but we used to go visit him all the time. He was, my favorite at the zoo. And I would just like stand outside and talk to him as long as they would let me before it was like, it's time to move on. And I named him Sunny because he was a sun bear. And so one day they turned their head for a second, and then the next thing they knew, they turned around and I was in the bear enclosure feeding him my ice cream.
Wow. Did you have like an ice cream cone that you were feeding?
Yeah, I had an ice cream cone, and I'm just, it's like total cartoon, surreal moment. And nothing happened. Everybody was fine. And the bear wasn't hurt either. They didn't have to like dart gun it or anything. They were like, come on, let's go this way, and got me out of there. But I have had those experiences my whole life with animals and had this very close connection. But it's only been the last year or so that I realized, and I had thought about it before. It's not like it was the first time I ever thought about it, but it's only been the last year or so that I started actually doing it for other people to help them with their cats, their dogs. Trying to think if I've had any other anything other than cats and dogs from clients. Not yet, but I'm sure they'll come. But how this all started was about a year and a half ago. It was in the middle of a really big fire that we were having close to where I live. I'm in Colorado, and I was out in my yard taking the dog out, and nothing very spectacular, but I was sitting and I looked down on this bench, and there was this little wood beetle that it was the weirdest thing, but it just seemed like he was looking at me, and so I just kind of said, "Hey, little guy, what's up?" And so he walked towards me on this bench and got like right to the edge where he would have had to fall off, and he's like making contact. And so I kind of got in closer and I said, "What's up? Do you have something to tell me?" And the next thing I knew, it felt like someone, I don't know, slipped me acid and replaced my eyeballs with kaleidoscopes, because it was like I was seeing through this tiny little insect's eyes and vision, and having this mind meld with his energy. And I could hear him. I could hear what he was telling me. He asked me to put out water and fruit because they were being driven, from their homes, and they were all having a hard time. He asked me not to kill them. He said, "Please don't kill any of us." And I said, "Okay, I can do that, but could you please have a talk with the wasps, because one stung me the other day and I'm allergic." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, well, I'll tell him." But and so I'm having this like, it felt like, okay, yeah, I've really lost it now.
You're like, "Oh, I'm
gonna have to go check myself in somewhere for a while. So I'm having this mind meld, and it allowed me to see everything around us in more of a crystalline form. And since then, I can kind of turn that on and off when I'm outside and out in nature, which is really cool. I've been practicing with that for a while. But so I said, "Well, I'm enjoying talking to you, but why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this?" And he said, you'll be speaking to, you'll be communicating with bigger things." And I was like, "What do you mean bigger things?" And like, "You'll see, just keep practicing and keep doing your work and you'll see." And so I finished this weird experience, and I will tell you, I felt sort of high and disoriented, just like, everything looked so strange. And I felt just sort of like I wasn't quite on Earth for about 2.5 days after that. But shortly enough, I think it was about maybe a month and a half later. So I get out of this experience and I'm thinking, so what, am I going to be like the three-eyed raven if the grid, if the internet goes away? Am I going to like see through birds' eyes or communicate with animals, or what am I doing? But the next thing I knew, it was the whales. I was communicating with the whales, and then I was communicating with Gaia. And so that was sort of like an amp up of that ability. And so once I started having these communications with the whales and the channelings and got more familiar with that, then I started doing some practice with people who needed help with their pets. And I've had enough experiences that, have proven to me that this really works. I can talk to them from anywhere, because I had a cat in Brooklyn wake me up about a month ago from a sound sleep to get in touch with the owner, because they were having a really difficult time in a situation with the kitty. And I helped another person. Their dog was suddenly being aggressive and they didn't understand what was going on. And I was so nervous to tell them this too, because everybody is, trying to manage resources. And I had to tell her that she needed to take him to the vet because he had some kind of bugs. I said, I don't know what he has. It could be like nose mites or ear mites or something, but he has something. And he had ticks. And so she got him in there fast enough and they got the ticks off and they were able to give him medicine so that he's not going to have Lyme disease. So these are the sorts of experiences I've been having.
Yeah.
And I have gotten far enough along with it now that I feel like I can start to help other people learn how to do this themselves. So tomorrow morning, I'm having my first animal communication workshop. It's through my Patreon, but you don't have to join the Patreon to come. You can just come anyway. It's $10 to attend, but that is going to be the first of monthly workshops that I'll be doing to help other people do this themselves, because I really believe that, we all have the ability to do anything we set our mind to and that we set our intention towards. And so it's really important to me to be teaching others how to do this, because that helps you connect, you connect to the animal kingdom, and then you connect to the earth better. And then, you connect to other humans better. And all of these things only enhance the whole entire project that is Earth.
Yeah, because we're all from everything. It's just from the Earth. We're all interconnected. So how can people? I'm going to have you do it again at the end, but for anybody that's in here right now, how do people find you for the class? You said it's through your Patreon.
Yeah, it's through my Patreon, but you can just DM me at Grooving Goddess on Instagram or Facebook. And all you need to do is Venmo me $10 and I'll send you the Zoom link and you can come to the workshop. It's at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time tomorrow. And like I said, I'll be doing them every month. It really is a great deal, though, if you just join the Patreon, because for the $10 tier, you get to come to all the workshops. And I do animal communication once a month, and then pleasure and sensuality for embodiment once a month, so that people learn how to enjoy being in their bodies more.
I think that's definitely needed too, as far as like enjoying the human experience in the body in which you have. Yes. With the animal communication, I thank you so much for sharing that, because I think there's a lot of people that are coming online right now or realizing what their spiritual gifts are, but because society doesn't match up with those extra perceptual abilities, a lot of times people doubt themselves and they don't go down those rabbit holes or things that they would enjoy or they see that's coming on for them, because they're nervous about, is that real? And
is it real, or what are people going to think?
Yeah. And
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, teaching people, I mean, that's empowering others. That is what makes me happy and brings me joy and makes me feel empowered also.
That's so beautiful, and that's needed. Like, we all need guides, right? It really is beneficial to have people that have been in those shoes and have gone through that and say like, hey, this is something that is an option for you too. You can do this. I'm doing it, right? When you have that communication with the beetle, do you feel like that is a time in which you contracted with the earth? Like, okay, I am going to fully give myself over and intentionally be in communication with everything, like all the plants, all the animals, Mother Gaia, everyone.
It was definitely an initiation to a higher level of connection, but I have felt that strong connection with nature and with earth most of my life. I used to spend a lot of time as a kid just laying under a tree and looking up through the leaves and talking to the tree and looking at the clouds and asking them to move, and just doing magical things that seemed normal to me when I was a kid. And I have felt that connection to the earth. But the beetle experience, it was like it blew open my third eye.
Yeah.
Like anything that was in the way, it blew that open. And I think that's what the experience was and what that felt like. And you had asked about the whales and the dolphins. Part of the reason the whales and the dolphins are so important and why they are coming to people, besides the fact that they provide sonic healing, you don't have to be an animal communicator. You don't have to meditate. You don't have to do any of this stuff. But if you just listen to whales and dolphins, listen to their song when you're not feeling well, or in whatever way, emotionally, physically, it doesn't matter. Just listening to that sound will help you. It provides sonic healing, but also they carry a much higher frequency. The Schumann Resonance, which is like a whole other topic on its own, but in the basic form, the Earth has a magnetic resonance that it resonates at, which is 7.83 hertz. And that's Earth's set point right now. And all life on Earth, including us, are attuned to that frequency. But since Earth started ascending 4 years ago, and that frequency shoots up and then dips down really low, and we have all of these different experiences that we have with it. Some of those experiences are from solar activity. Some of them are cosmic rays from elsewhere. Some of them have to do with human consciousness. Some of them indicate time shifts. So it's not like a very simple answer as to what that's doing. But whales, they resonate at 30 hertz. And everybody has their own frequency. Most of us are fairly close to that 8 to 10 hertz that the Earth is, and we've been in that same zone. But I would imagine if they were to go around and start testing people, they might find that a lot of us are resonating at a higher frequency. But the whales, they resonate at 30 hertz, which is like the Zen Buddhist monk frequency. That's when you're in the flow state. Yeah, it's a big difference. And so they carry that higher frequency. They carry that unconditional love. And when we connect with them, they help us to harmonize with the Earth. It helps us during those times when the Schumann resonance is very elevated. And so you asked me what I think the purpose of all of this is, like, what is this whole ascension thing about? And what is it about with the cosmology and the sun? What I believe and what the whales have told me is that eventually 30 hertz will be the new set point around that number. And so they are here to help anchor that frequency while Earth expands as well, while Earth expands her consciousness.
That is so beautiful. They're such beautiful creatures, dolphins and whales. I randomly started listening to whale sounds and dolphin sounds just out of the blue. I said, you know what? I would love to listen to whales and dolphins. And I started listening to them. I had some interactions with dolphins over the summer, and they were swimming around me and my friends. And I started being drawn to do that in my Reiki with people. If for the noise in the background is for whales and dolphin noises, and it just amplifies the love energy just tenfold when I do that. Like I know exactly what you're saying. They're just such beautiful, beautiful creatures and have so much wisdom for us as well. They've been around for forever.
Yeah, they have. And it is amazing because, like, for instance, with my health battles, even 6 months ago, sitting this long to have a conversation, being on camera like this, like, all of these things were very difficult for me. Sometimes, like, there's a couple episodes of Meow Podcast. That's why I had an audio podcast only before, is because I didn't have to worry about if I needed to sit up. I could lay down and do it, but I have learned through this process over the last year in this connection with the whales and with Gaia that I can just put on some whale song, lay down for 10 or 20 minutes and start the breathing, close my eyes, listen to the whale song, and ask them to help me heal and help give me energy. And I go right out. You know what I mean? Like I'm immediately in the zone, just in the bliss zone. And then I come out of it and I'm like, ah, that was nice. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I slept several hours and I'm just completely restored. They are very powerful. Very powerful.
And I think that's a great tip for anybody else that is experiencing, you know, similar things too. If you want a lot more energy and feeling that love frequency and just rebalance, realign, to listen to dolphins and whales. And
they're really great. They're really great if you're experiencing sadness. You know, if you're working through, like, say you're doing some really tough shadow work or trauma releasing or whatever you're trying to heal from, or maybe you're just feeling the collective grief or the collective sadness or whatever it is. If you are kind of feeling like, you know you need to get these feelings out, but you're having difficulty with it, or you're like, I just wish I could like cry on someone's shoulder. You know what I mean? Get in the bathtub, put your phone nearby, put on some whale song, and just get in the tub and do a little breathing and ask for them to come. And it's the most amazing thing, but it's like they really do. And you feel like they're comforting you. You feel like they're there, and they're there to cry with you, because some of their sounds, you know, are expressing like that. Not every sound they make is a happy sound. Like they experience a full range of emotions and have relationships with each other. And so it's like they will come be with you, you know, and be your witness, and give you that love when you need it. And so there has been more than one thing that I have cried out in the bathtub with my whale friends.
That was a beautiful experience though. And that's
it really
idea.
is.
Yeah, that's a great idea with the bathtub, because water is an amplifier too.
Yes.
It's representative of our emotions and releasing, and you can ask the water to take your emotions as well and help you with that release process. So I might do that tonight too.
And if you're so moved, take a cup and scoop up water and pour it over you. And as you're pouring it over, you can say, I wash away grief. I wash away self-doubt. I wash away sadness. I wash away pain and suffering, you know, resentment, whatever it is that you're trying to release. And then you can say, I bathe myself in unconditional love. I bathe myself in source energy. I wash myself in abundance. And it's something that I started doing not too long ago, because goddesses, you know, back in the day, they had temples and they had public bathing rituals like that. That's, you know, and they would get in the water to be an oracle, because it is easier to make those connections when you're connected with water. So that's kind of where that came from, but it just feels spectacular when it's happening.
Yeah, and if you make a big ritual out of it too, like that helps just amplify everything and get you in that kind of meditative flow state and connect with the source and yourself. That's beautiful, Andrea. I'm going to do that tonight. Okay, Andrea, before we close up, I had something that I wanted to ask you about your podcast, Grooving Goddess. And so I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to call it Grooving Goddess?
It is really funny, actually. When I first started my separate Instagram, because I only started posting card readings a few years ago online, and for quite a while I was just doing it on my, you know, my individual personal Instagram. And then when I realized, okay, I need to make a separate thing for this because it's turning into something. Initially, I called it Goddess Card Wisdom, because I was reading mostly goddess cards, because I was just drawn to that because this is before I had figured out a whole lot of stuff, So I was kind of immersed in that. And then I'm trying to remember exactly what made me change. Oh, I know what it was. So I wound up getting on Smule, which is a karaoke app, when I was not able to be going out to karaoke and singing or be in a place where I could go perform and do that stuff. I would sing on this app through my phone, and I really enjoyed that. And so it just came to me, the Grooving Goddess thing. And then when I started looking, like first of all, I couldn't believe the name was available, because it's you would think it would have been gone, right, already, but it was available. And not only has it been available on Instagram, but because I do things in stages. I'm a Taurus, so I like baby steps of change. And so I changed my account name to Grooving Goddess right before the panini happened. And then that was only on Instagram, no Facebook page or anything else, right? And then about 6 months later, 8 months later, I started the podcast. So it's like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to call the podcast. And that was available. And then it's like, well, I guess I need a Facebook page now. And that was available. And then on TikTok, it's available. So I guess I was supposed to have it, you know?
Yeah, it was all ready for you. I'd say we were keeping it for you. It was for you. That is you, Grooving Goddess. Yeah. And so why did you decide to start that podcast, if I can ask?
Oh, sure. I started it soon after the bug communication, because I had been listening to other podcasts, and I really liked the format of being able to give the collective readings with audio. And in a way, it was me dodging being on camera. Okay. Because I was just, at this time, I was still only just posting, card pictures and words. I never did videos or any of that on Instagram. And so it was a way to dodge the camera. But the reason I really wanted to start it was I wanted to start talking about the grid work and the astral knot training and the experiences that I was having, because I knew it was going to activate people. I knew it was going to help me grow. I knew that the guests that I attracted, that we would help enhance each other's experience of all of this and learn so much from each other. So that was really my motivation for starting it. And the listeners and everything that's happened and what the ways in which I have grown and I've watched others grow has been what's motivated me to keep going. And so I've made my little baby steps to getting on video, and then getting on TikTok and getting on YouTube and all of those things over the last year plus. So.
Well, you're so brave and so courageous for doing all those things, because they're difficult. Especially if because I've been through it too. And it's like paving the way for other people and saying like, hey, you can do this too. And it's also, when you heal other people and help other people, it perpetuates your own healing process. So it's very cyclical. And
it really is.
Yeah, I love all the intentions that you had with your podcast. And I'm sure you have healed many people and me included with your podcast. And so I recommend that everybody check it out. And I wanted to say too, Andrea sings so beautifully. And something that came into my mind was back to the whales and dolphins, how they carry that frequency, that healing frequency. That's you too. You carry that same type of high vibrational healing in your voice. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I should have mentioned I was in a band and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, that's what the grooving part, is like kind of my thing. Just music was always a part of my life. So yeah, in my younger days, my 20s and early 30s, I was a lead singer in a couple different bands. So I have always known that my voice had an effect on people. I just didn't quite understand it, but I understand it better now that I understand that my energy amplifies things. And so, because like sometimes people, like I would, because we were playing in bars and I would be singing like garage band cover songs that you're supposed to do shots to and shake your booty, right? And people would be like coming up having these like deep emotional
Yeah.
responses, to like cat scratch fever or whatever it was.
You're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And something that's starting to happen, which is kind of cool. And some of the viewers might notice this if they start listening to the whales and dolphins, you start to understand what they're saying. Like you start to feel like you hear words. It is pretty wild. And then the other thing that's just happening for me recently is I'm starting to be able to mimic the lower tones so that I can bring it like down into the body. And I do use the whale song while we're doing the consciousness anchoring as well.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's so beautiful. I love that. I'm sure they love coming in and helping as well. They're like, oh, we're glad to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Andrea, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you for all you wear a lot of hats, Andrea. You do a lot of things. All of the things.
All right. Okay. Let's start with, you can find me literally everywhere except Twitter at Grooving Goddess, because I managed to get lucky in that way. I do have the Grooving Goddess podcast, and there's 3 seasons of that. And I recently just started in September a Grooving Goddess Patreon, and we're a slowly growing community, the Xanadu Collective. I picked Xanadu because that movie was part of the reason that I knew when I was a child that I wasn't always this earth person. That was a very activating experience. So I call it the Xanadu Collective. And in the Patreon, we have the workshops. I do a weekly meeting. I call it Gridwork 101. And we just talk about all different types of aspects of space weather, grid work, and general, ascension. And then I usually pull cards for whoever happens to be there live. I do a monthly collective reading for the Patreon. So really enjoying that. And I will tell you, there's a $10 tier and a $20 tier. At the $10 tier, there is a $5 tier if you would just like to support the podcast and my efforts. But the $10 tier, you get all of the workshops, all of the meetings, everything's included. And you also have access to the entire back catalog of everything I've recorded up to now. And then at the $20 tier, that's the VIP tier, you get 1 free service a month. So anything off my menu of services, which includes animal communication, consciousness anchoring, a variety of oracle readings, mediumship. I also do animal mediumship because that can be very helpful for people. With the mediumship, it's more like grief mediumship. So I am my most effective with that if it's very recent that you've lost someone. Let's see, is there anything else on that menu? No. I think that's it. But anyway, you can get all the services, or if you would just like to book a session with me for any of those things, you can find me at my link tree. So it's just link.tr.ee.com/grooving goddess. And Patreon is also /grooving goddess. You will have to go do that through a browser if you want to join the Patreon, because I have it rated as 18+. So it won't let you search it just in the app. I always have to tell people that. So then I also have these other podcasts. There's Meow podcast, which is on YouTube. That's MEOWW, and a long story behind the name, but basically my pod partner and I, she is in Trinidad. We have all kinds of guests on and talk about a whole lot of different topics. One of our most recent episodes, someone did aura readings for us, and then we talked about that. Episode before that, we had a panel of Black and brown yoga practitioners and their experience of, what that has been like for them, because there is so much that BIPOC people have been gate kept out of in the spiritual communities. And so that's a really, really wonderful podcast. Oh yeah. And we're interviewing Karen Rontowski this Wednesday. Pretty excited about that. And then my little side project, which you can't really find on any of the podcatchers yet, because I don't have enough episodes up. And I think I may be fighting over the name dirtiness possibly, but Diction with a K podcast is meant to be about all goofy things dating and the dick bombing phenomenon, because I'm trying to understand what's really behind all that, because it's not all just pervy dudes. I think a lot of men think that's their value. Like things have kind of switched up that way in social paradigms. So there's that podcast. And I mean, it is hilarious because this is the first time I've dated in like 25 years. I was married for a long time. So there wasn't even internet last time I was dating. So that's been pretty wild. I have the socio-political podcast, Call Me Karen. And you can find all of these links on my Grooving Goddess page. I have them all up there. That one I started, and it was the first podcast I started. I started it right after George Floyd happened, because I wanted to try to lure in my demographic, like lure in would-be Karens, to have their eyes opened a little bit, because I would have that appeal. And it turned into a really, really wonderful project. So much took off with Grooving Goddess this year. I set it aside for a while. I also chronicle on there my experience with my mom getting diagnosed with dementia and going through that whole process. And gosh, is that it? I hope that's it. That's a lot. Like, yeah, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 podcasts. That's it. That's everything.
Andrea, you must be excellent at time management and organization.
I am. I actually am pretty good at it. And just so you know, like I purposely, for instance, I have my booking area, right, where people go book appointments. And if I get, let's say I have a podcast interview and then someone else books a session, I block out most of the rest of that day for downtime, because otherwise I know I just get overloaded. So go with the flow. And like part of the reason I haven't done anything with Call Me Karen much is because I've just given myself the space to know, all right, I needed to set that aside for a while, and when I'm ready, I'll come back to it.
Yeah, a lot of time things just come back around when it's time for them to come back around, and follow where your heart's taking you and spirit's taking you, and just go with the flow. Well, thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to thank you. This has been so much fun. I mean, we had just the best time talking for my podcast, and this has been equally joyful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on. You, like I said, are such a well of wisdom. And every time I have conversations with you, I just feel so enlightened, and I learn so many new things. And I know there are a lot of people that watch this are going to learn, and you explain everything so beautifully and break everything down on a level that everybody can understand. And I appreciate that so much.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm really glad to know that, because that's what I'm trying to do. And, that's really what the start of all of this space weather study and learning about the Schumann Resonance came from, is that I realized this is affecting me physically and mentally, and I need to understand why. And so once I understood why, then I figured out, okay, now I need to figure out how to tell people. So I'm glad that I'm doing a decent job of that.
Yes, I have a much better understanding now. Thank you for myself.
You're welcome.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. This has been wonderful. It's always so much fun talking to you, and I appreciate you coming on. And I know everybody that is going to watch this in the future and watch it while we were live enjoyed themselves too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and you have a wonderful evening, and to everyone else that joined in the chat today. And we will see you next time. Yes. And have a good night.
Good night.